The Talk Station presents Faith Matters, a look at contemporary stories and issues from a faith perspective. While this is a pre-recorded show, we are interested in your ideas, comments, and questions, and we urge you to email them to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life.
And now on the Talk Station, Faith Matters.
And welcome to our program. Good to have you with us here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station. I'm Ben Ball, along with the Reverend Robert Carnegie, Associate Pastor, Chapel by the Sea in Emerald Isle, and Bishop Doc Loomis, a Bishop in Residence at All Saints Anglican Church. And glad to have you both with us as we get going. Good day, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Morning.
All right, let's start with a decision that was handed down by a grand jury, and this happened this past week. The headline from ChristianHeadlines.com is "Man Behind Undercover Planned Parenthood Video Indicted by Grand Jury." There were several other articles about it too. LifeNews.com, Grand Jury Ignores Planned Parenthood Selling Aborted Babies, Indicts Man Behind Videos Instead. A Texas grand jury has ignored the videos exposing a Houston-based Planned Parenthood abortion clinic caught selling aborted baby parts, and instead has indicted the man behind producing the expose videos. The video of the Houston Planned Parenthood makes it appear that Planned Parenthood abortion business may be selling the fully intact bodies of unborn babies purposely born alive and left to die. The video shows the director of research for Planned Parenthood's Gulf Coast, Melissa Farrell, advertising the Texas Planned Parenthood branch's track record of fetal tissue sales, including its ability to deliver fully intact aborted babies. I think we all know the video that's in question here today. But today, Texas grand jury indicted David Daleiden and another pro-life activist behind the videos. Instead of prosecuting Planned Parenthood for aborted baby parts, Daleiden was indicted for buying them. The charges, as I understand them, were twofold. There were one was the actual felony was for misrepresenting a government document, or basically they did fake IDs. That's what I understand. Is that right, Robert?
That's what I understand.
And
it was
driver's
a California
license.
driver's license. Yeah.
And then there was a misdemeanor in the indictment, and that was for having a fake company that offered to buy these parts.
Right.
Again, the grand jury was convened with a lot of people with the understanding is that they were looking for evidence of Planned Parenthood illegality, and again turned it around here. Robert, I think a lot of people, and certainly you've been involved in the pro-life movement for a long time, a lot of people were aghast when this came out.
Yeah, it wasn't expected. But then Texas has had a real controversy around this issue. It's also fascinating that it was right at kind of the weekend, if you will, or the week of the protest march.
March on Life.
100,000 people did the protest march in Washington, D.C.
In the snow.
And a lot of folks from down here went up there, and also a lot of in our church and many other churches around the community, there was presentations on sanctity, dignity of human life from the point of conception to death, kind of the cradle to grave concept of that, and then to have this come out of the system in Texas was a surprise. And it's fascinating that they treated what was obviously a journalistic effort to find out what's going on, the backstory, the hidden story. They treated it as though it was a real attempt to purchase.
Yeah.
Rather than as a whistleblower kind of event that, we find journalists doing this stuff all the time. And so, there's going to be one more point is that Texas had already cut off funding to Planned Parenthood. And so we're seeing the battle lines. This kind of laid it out right there. So you're going to see this battle between these two forces.
And Doc, this is they have proven in the past, Planned Parenthood has, that they're not to be trifled with. I mean, that this is kind of a David and Goliath. These guys going in undercover exposed an underbelly that I think a lot of people were really shocked at, even some who supported Planned Parenthood in the past.
Yeah, they are a big deal, and they have a lot of support, and sadly they have a lot of support from our government and our tax money. You know, that's the thing that drives me crazy, is waking up in the morning and realizing that a tax bill that I'm paying is going to help somebody abort a child and part that child up in a very methodical way. In fact, to actually know what parts are needed and then kind of plan the abortion in such a way that those parts can be harvested successfully to further add to the bottom line of Planned Parenthood, who does abortions. And we're a part of that. I think for me, that's the big frustration is, I think everybody asks the same question. What can we do about that? You go in there like this guy did, and the next thing you know, you're in front of a judge getting much more than a hand slap. Now, they may drop these charges, and it's conceivable, and I hope they do, but the reality is he's in really big trouble. And the amazing thing is Planned Parenthood, the big story in this is Planned Parenthood is exonerated.
Correct.
They have done nothing wrong according to that same criminal justice system.
And that's not the rest of the story is still unfolding here. According to the online blog Crux, covering all things Catholic, it says also last week Planned Parenthood filed a federal racketeering lawsuit against Delilah and Merritt, the two who were charged or indicted, along with the Center for Medical Progress and Biomax and several other identified as helping create the videos. Remember, his charge was a misdemeanor.
Right.
Jaywalking. It was a misdemeanor, and now they're going after a federal racketeering lawsuit.
The RICO laws. Yep.
And
that's really, they're using those RICO laws in lots of mischievous ways. They're stretching the envelope on how far they can push these things, and I mean they're going after they're using terrorism laws on some of these things, and but the problem is obviously we have a court that is sympathetic to this, I'm just going to use it, this culture of death that's grown up in America now. We have a culture of death. And the advocates for that are very good at bringing at the adjudication side of it, to using the judges and the laws and distorting those and going after. So there are all kinds of petitions being raised to drop the charges, and there's going to be a pushback on it for sure. But it's going to be fought all the way. There are a number of big groups that are getting in on this on the pro-life side. That the Jay Sekulows and Whitehead and a bunch of those people. What is it? Defending Freedom. ADF is involved in that as well. Yeah.
This is again what you're saying here is an indictment really against our culture and our society that has turned the tables on this story.
Yeah. Well, the whole intent. One of the ways you judge a nation is the way they protect their innocent members. And so, we have failed. And as far as I'm concerned, this is the big ticket item that America is going to have to reckon with one day. I mean, we're already reckoning with it, but it's a big one that we are. And Lord's very clear that He says He hates the shedding of innocent blood.
He's also very clear what religion is, and that's that we care for widows and orphans.
That's right.
And at the very worst, an aborted child is an orphan and becomes the ward of us, the true religion. We're the ones that are supposed to take care of these people.
That's right.
And it is unbelievable how numb we have become.
Yeah.
I talked to two young people the other night in their mid-teens, and they were completely every one of them knew somebody that had an abortion. Right here in the school systems.
Right.
And yet not one of the kids I talked to was aware of this particular story. that Planned Parenthood was doing this. We are numb, and we're producing, because as parents we're not sharing this with our kids, I don't think, we're producing a generation of kids who are going to be even more numb. Yeah. And the culture of death is really very much alive. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is crawling and scraping to get into our kids' minds right now. And this numbness that we have, and frankly, the numbness the church has about this, mm-hmm. A couple of, right to life groups notwithstanding, the church generally is numb. This is not getting preached from pulpits. We are not talking about the role of the church in the lives of these innocent children. Yeah. But we'll talk all day about gun control when 11 kids get shot. But if we abort 1,000 or 2 a day, well, that's just fine and dandy. We don't have to talk about that. I mean, what has happened?
Yeah, CDC's latest numbers they put it at about 600 million. Since in the 43 years that Roe v. Wade has been enforced, since the Supreme Court made that decision that it was no longer a state's issue. There were many states that already had abortion laws or anti-abortion laws or whatever.
Some states where you could, some states where you couldn't.
Yeah, exactly. It was a state's issue. And then when the Supreme Court made that decision, Roe v. Wade, that made it a federal issue. And so all states had to comply with that federal law. And same thing with marriage. That's what we've just seen done with marriage. That was a states' rights issue. Now it's no longer that. And so, 40 and there are several states that are not required to report their abortion statistics. Mm-hmm. So from those that do, we know that we're about 55, but they're estimating about 60 million children are have been aborted in the last 4 decades.
Well, let's just say Christians cannot stand and just watch this happen.
Absolutely.
Have more to come in just a moment here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. Welcome back to Faith Matters here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. I'm Ben Ball, along with Bishop Doc Loomis and Reverend Robert Cornegy. One of the things that happened this past week as well, Liberty University President Jerry Falwell Jr., the son of the late televangelist, endorsed Donald Trump on Tuesday, giving the Republican frontrunner the blessing of one of the evangelical community's biggest names just before the Iowa caucuses. Now, this is from an article in the Washington Post about this endorsement. And in a statement, Falwell called Trump a successful executive and an entrepreneur, a wonderful father, and a man who I believe can lead our country to greatness again. He didn't call him a committed Christian, though, did he?
He did not. No.
Not in that quote, but in another one later he did.
Yeah. This is Liberty University has held they call them convocations, I think, where they've invited. Bernie Sanders spoke there. I don't know if any other...
Cruz has.
Mm-hmm. And Donald Trump has. Mm-hmm. And they've all been very polite and welcoming to viewpoints that are maybe vary quite a bit from some of the people in the audience. Doesn't matter. They welcome them in, which is refreshing, I think, for in a university setting. We're not seeing a lot of that. But here we have, again, and Falwell's Trump's famous... statement in there was reading from 2 Corinthians, which made a lot of people either squirm or laugh, one or the other. But what do you think about this? First of all, is Jerry Falwell Jr. The evangelical leader that is worthy of paying attention to when he endorses somebody, and should he be endorsing somebody? Robert?
Well, yeah. He has a right to do that. He's not head of the church there.
At Liberty.
At Liberty, yeah. His brother does that,
right?
And so he's head of the school. And his father endorsed Reagan. I'm pretty sure.
I think you're correct on that.
Yeah,
yes.
I'm pretty sure he did. So it's kind of a family tradition, I guess, that they do endorse different ones. But anyway, that he endorsed Trump. Look, the evangelical social media network has exploded over this whole thing of And Trump said it, and he quoted his father saying, look, we're not trying to hire a Sunday school teacher. Mm-hmm. We're looking for a president. We're looking for somebody that can get things done. And he has his reasons why he believes Trump is that man. Many in the evangelical side do not agree with that position. And so we're seeing this sort of, inside baseball, inside the camp battles going on. And there's actually there's several groups that have sprung up on the Liberty campus that are sort of anti this endorsement, and they're forming groups and petitions and all kinds of stuff to be against that.
What Falwell said, actually mentioned that quote. It says, when he walked into the voting booth, he wasn't electing a Sunday school teacher or a pastor or even a president who shared his theological beliefs. He was electing the president of the United States with the talents, abilities, and experience required to lead the nation. Falwell said of his father. After all, Jimmy Carter was a great Sunday school teacher, but look what happened to our nation with him in his presidency. That's what he's talking about there.
That's a great quote.
Is this what do you does it make you, Doc, uneasy when a religious leader endorses a candidate?
Oh no! I mean, we're three religious leaders here, and I have no problem putting myself behind a candidate when I finally decide which one. But I don't have any problem with religious people endorsing. I mean, this is a kind of a piece of that's been missing from religion, frankly, since the founding of this country, and certainly during the times of our most difficult times like the Civil War would be a really good example for those who are history buffs. The Civil War, the presidential elections were largely moved from the pulpit. I mean, largely moved. And frankly, the candidates and the people who held office were moved. It could be argued that Abraham Lincoln, by example, was largely moved by the religious tone of the day, and that he, in what he did, actually then moved the religious tone of the day in some direction. So there's always been a relationship where candidates are endorsed or castigated by religion. I think that's absolutely fine. What's fascinating I got to tell you, what's fascinating about the Trump phenomenon is, he's pretty well known right now for his kind of anti-Muslim rhetoric. This has been a big part, build a wall, keep them out, even if only for a while. And the funny thing is, Jerry Falwell, the deceased Jerry Falwell, the original Jerry Falwell, actually, he was quoted during the last campaign of his life as saying, if I were elected, do you remember he wanted to be president at one time? Do you remember that?
Right.
Yeah. Right. And he said, if I were elected president, he said, my cabinet would be filled with Muslims. So I think it's very interesting that Trump, with his anti-Muslim rhetoric, showed up on, in Jerry's stomping ground, and made that kind of a comment.
Well, what do you think, Robert? Is this again? Is this something that you mentioned about the evangelical community kind of reacting pretty strongly one way or another on this?
Yeah. Well, my concern, and whether it's a real concern or not, we'll discover as time goes on, is that we have a real problem in the evangelical church. Is that what is it? Less than 50% of evangelicals are registered to vote, and less than 50% of evangelicals that are registered to vote actually vote.
Yeah.
So we're down to about a 25% voting pool historically, or in the last few elections anyway, and particularly in the last one. And so now, what Trump has done has motivated, at least rhetorically, a bunch of people to start pay attention to politics that had just completely abandoned politics. They were just not interested.
Well, he has commanded the stage and the media stage as well.
And so topics are being talked about. Us who follow these things, we're always going to talk about this stuff. But those who are uninterested in politics, he's gotten debate going. So I can say there's one good thing that's come out of this, is
Jerry-
that at least people are talking about it.
Jerry
Now,
Falwell,
whether they vote or not and how they vote is another deal, and that's what we're going to see. My fear would be that we have a repeat of the first Clinton election campaign, and where we had a third party breakout on the conservative side, the Ross Perot, and that divided the conservative vote, and the results was Clinton.
Well, some will also say that also happened in the George Bush election too, with Al Gore, when you had the Green Power.
Well, that's true. On the other side,
ran as well. So,
yeah, on the other side.
So
that's right.
that is one of the concerns. But Jerry Falwell you mentioned about political aspirations. He in 1976 he did a series of I Love America rallies, and and he was the one who had the quote about saying God is calling millions of Americans in the so-called silent majority. And so that's where the silent majority phrase started to crop up. But here we have somebody who is hardly silent in the candidates, and none of the candidates are. And he's also received an endorsement too from Sarah Palin this past week and a half. Those, and she has been a darling of evangelical movements as well. So, and was once a supporter of Ted Cruz.
Yeah.
So that's thrown a lot of things into the mix here now.
It's a lot of using of evangelicals. I guess that's where I have a hard time, Robert. I don't like, as an evangelical person, I don't like somebody patronizing me and using me to get me to talk about things, to get me to vote about things. I'm waiting for the presidential candidate that stands up and says what everybody at Liberty knows and what we know sitting in this room. And that is, until this country returns to God.
Yes.
That
is how this gets fixed. It's not a matter of whether he's a good business person or the art of the deal or anything else. It's a matter of, it's 2 Chronicles 7:14 all over again. We have got to get ourselves back on the right track and get right with God the way our founding fathers intended it. And while you can get a Trump who stand up and say, make America great again, heck with that. Make America godly again.
Yeah.
And who is that candidate? Who's the one that's going to stand up and do more than just blow smoke? I mean, who's the one that's actually going to call this country to its knees? And I think that's the reason that around here at Carteret County, I talk to a lot of people who love Ben Carson. And the reason they love Ben Carson is because he has actually said that. He actually believes in his heart that a return to a great America is a return to a godly America. And
sad, and you're right, absolutely. Sadly, that's not. There's still the majority of the candidates thinks that politics can fix this, and politics can't fix it.
It's the greatest lie that's been heaved on this society.
Yeah.
That any one of those candidates is going to make a difference. Only God is going to do it.
Well, how about among evangelicals, though? Are they just as susceptible as lots of other groups? As they want to back a winner?
Well, absolutely, yeah. And there was a study done back in the 96, I think it was, a paper was written about this, and it was this whole populist position. And, that's what brought Obama into winning. He commanded the populist position. And we're seeing this with Trump. And so we have a group of people in America now that's not small by any means, that are just looking at the celebrity side of it, and
the wrong savior.
Yeah, exactly right. We are just in trouble with that.
We'll have more to come in a moment here on Faith Matters on the talk station FM 107 and AM 1240. And welcome back to Faith Matters here on the talk station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And I'm Ben Ball, along with Bishop Doc Loomis, Reverend Robert Cornegie. And we'll talk now about something that is taking place within the United Methodist Church. And this is a ban on a group that wanted to have a table at the quadrennial conference called the General Conference. The headline from the Christian Post is United Methodist Church bans Intelligent Design Group from General Conference. United Methodist Church has rejected an Intelligent Designs Group request to have an information table at the 2016 General Conference, reaffirming a decision from December. The UMC's Commission on the General Conference decided last week not to allow the Seattle-based Discovery Institute an information table at the mainline Protestant denominations gathering in Portland, Oregon. Diane Degnan, a spokeswoman for the UMC, told the Christian Post that this was the first General Conference to allow for outside exhibitors. Let me say that those who have been to annual conferences of the Methodist Church have seen a lot of outside exhibitors. So they tend to line the hallways around it. This past one that we had in Wilmington did not, and I didn't know. I never did find out why that was the case, but they did not have those kinds of same exhibitors. But they have in the past, and they've been from a variety of expressions. For example, I believe it's called the Rainbow Covenant, which is a gay rights Christian group, and then they have also the Confessing Movement, which is runs a more orthodox understanding of marriage there too. So it's they typically have run the gamut of those, but I've never been to General Conference, so I don't know about that in the past. I'll just take the word for it that they've not had that in the past, but this time they are having some outside, or they're having some exhibits, and they're not allowing this particular group there. That has also been now distributed. Robert, you have seen this show up in a lot of social media, a lot of different places. A website called Evolution News and Views has castigated the Methodist Church for this ban. And they've included some quotes from people who are delegates to the Methodist Church who also are against this ban, too. So it is interesting because, as we have noted here before, I'm the Methodist in the bunch. But when Mark was with us as well, we note that the Methodist Church often rides the fence on a lot of issues, and then tries to incorporate a pretty big tent of a variety of issues coming in.
Open hearts, right?
Open doors.
Right. There you go.
Open minds, open hearts, open doors. Yeah, that's the idea. But in it has been, some groups have become more strident than others, though, in more recent years.
Well, my understanding,
Robert, why don't you pull up your microphone? That would be helpful
probably
to
a
our
good idea.
discussion.
I was in the other room.
Yeah, that's right. We were hearing you from afar.
I've been down at afar. But there was a resolution, I think, in 2008 at one of the conferences. I guess it was the general conference.
Actually, I have that.
Yeah, that basically came out and said that the Methodist Church is opposed to having creationism or ID, which is intelligent design, which are actually two different things.
Right.
And
but either one into science curriculum of public schools.
Yeah.
That's what the resolution
and the main reason, I assume, is that their assumption is that this has a religious content to it. Definitely creationism does. But you'll find when you get with the ID crowd, the intelligent design crowd, that there are atheists, there are the whole range of positions on this. And primarily from a scientific position, they argue that there's some sort of intelligence was required to be able to have the kind of world that we have today.
But they very purposely leave God
and all of
theology out of it.
The Bible's not a part of it. It's not part of the discussion. And that's where the assumption is made that those two, one is just kind of a stealth version of the other, which it is not. Yeah. And a lot of atheists, non-believers, secular scientists have adopted the ID position. So that's what we're talking about here. So, and the idea look, historically until the last 200 years, there was really no debate about this issue within the church, primarily. That obviously, there was a creator. If there's a creation, there's a creator. And so that was the position that was, throughout the Christian worldview. But in the last 150, 200 years, it's shifted.
But it was also shared by a lot of people, including our founding fathers, who disagreed somewhat on what the nature of that creator or
exactly
would
right.
be, or that providence would be,
right.
But did believe that there was such a beginning.
It's fascinating. Dawkins and some of the what we call fundamentalist atheists that are out there, the new air quote new atheists,
The evangelical atheists.
Yeah, they argue that, look, just because it looks like it's design, you have to keep telling yourself as you're studying this stuff that it really isn't design. There is no design there. It just looks like it was designed. That's how they counter these things. So yeah, I'm an ID guy. I'm an intelligent design guy. And so for a mainline denomination to say that's ridiculous. Look, I don't remember I was real young at the first Scopes trial. That was in 1929.
You were a little young, yeah.
A little young. And the problem was that whole trial.
And they took your monkey too.
They did. And that whole trial was about the only thing being taught in the public schools at that time was creationism.
Right.
And so the argument, the legal battle was to include, not replace.
Right, but include.
But include so that you would have both, because the children needed to learn both, and then they could make their decision. It was open minds, right? Mm-hmm. Well, then there was another Scopes trial that was about 10 years ago, in which it was up in Delaware, I think, and that was where they basically decided that no, we can't have both taught at the same time. We can only have one.
Right.
And so we're going to go with the evolution,
But that decision wasn't an academic one. It was a government and religion decision.
Exactly.
As I recall that,
because they were throwing, they didn't want the government to support religious education, kind of thing. So it's such a hot mess. Tell you the truth, this whole thing is, and so I think that's why that, to me, that the church would take a position, that strong of a position on it is sort of,
the one
counter
of the,
to their positions.
Yeah, from this evolutionnews.org website, they quote John Lomperis, conference delegate and the United Methodist director at the Institute on Religion and Democracy. He notes a striking contrast. His quote is, "These very same leaders that are excluding the very mild-mannered Discovery Institute have, on the other hand, been willing to not been willing to take a firm stand against letting outside militant gay rights groups from forcibly taking over business meetings of the General Conference," which happened at the last General Conference. And he goes on to tell One News Now that while the IRD, that was, again, the Institute of Religion and Democracy, will be allowed to have an exhibit table, his organization was actually rejected from being a paid sponsor of the General Conference. Staples, the office supply store, is being allowed to be a paid sponsor. Staples is a paid sponsor.
I think Donald Trump has a table there too. I'm almost certain of that.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Right next to the Planned Parenthood table, perhaps.
Right.
I don't know.
Right. So groups like Democracy Institute and my group get treated as we've got to be careful of them because they're bringing a particular agenda. Lamperis laments, but the fact is that so many of the demonstrations, general agencies, or denominations' general agencies, are run by activist liberals who are very actively and openly opposed to a denomination's biblical doctrine and values. So here, this is we often see in denominational churches battle lines being drawn over single issues: gay marriage, women in the pulpit, these various issues like this. When he states really what is the underlying issue, whether or not our biblical doctrine and values are going to prevail.
Ben, this has happened in every denomination that it could afford to rent a big hall and get pipe and drape up, and turn these things into money making events. Seriously, I mean, this is nothing. They've become trade shows. I watched it in my old denomination, And it is amazing to me that we have so lost. Look at the early councils of the church. People sat around and they talked about heresies. They talked about things that were confronting the church that mattered in the lives of people. They talked about theology. They talked about the nature of God. Now these conventions, almost all of them, have debilitated down to the point where we're going topic by topic about whose bank is not going to get our money, whose pension fund we're not going to fund, who gets a table, who doesn't get a table. It has become, it's a sideshow. It's a circus sideshow. And it's so sad right now. You just want to grab these denominations and just shake them until all the baloney falls out of their pockets and they get back to doing what denominations are supposed to do when they get together.
Several years ago in our annual conference, we're meeting in Greenville, and as for the first time, they allowed commercial sponsors to sponsor an evening, one of the various evenings that were had, and they had, and in that, for that particular one though, they brought in a speaker and artist who did some other things with music and art and some other things, but as he was getting laughs after laugh, he got a little looser till he started dropping the F-bomb.
Oh, sweet!
In front of the Methodist bishop and the
Open
pastors
minds.
and the whole works, and once and then twice and it was, I remember the bishop saying that very next day, he said something like, for all of about 11 words, that was a pretty good evening, except for those 11 words.
Yeah. It's hard not to forget those 11 words.
Yes, because those become seared in the memory.
Right.
So this is an ongoing discussion, but I think it comes down to whether or not we're going to stay with our values or not. We'll have more to come in a moment here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station. And welcome back here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And thank you for joining us here today as we take a look at issues that are happening around our country and around the world and that also intersect with our faith. And today, this last one for this final segment here is a little bit different. As we take a look at a story that is coming out of Kentucky. This one actually is from Kentucky Forward, Kentucky's online newspaper. Judge rules in favor of answers in Genesis for tax incentives on Williamston Ark Encounter project. A federal court yesterday issued a preliminary injunction against the state of Kentucky for blocking efforts by the Ark Encounter theme park developer Answers in Genesis to participate in the Kentucky Tourism Development Program. The federal court found that the Commonwealth exclusion of AIG from participating in the program for the reasons stated, i.e. on the basis of AIG's religious beliefs, purpose, mission, message, or conduct, is a violation of AIG's rights under the First Amendment to the federal Constitution. A judge that got it.
Wow.
Well, that's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Wow.
The judge has ordered the state to move forward in processing AIG's application for the available tax rebate incentives that would become effective after the Ark opens and is operating. Bishop, you have a little familiarity with this group and this project?
Well, I'll tell you, biblically speaking, Noah had the exact same problem. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Tax incentives?
Yeah, tax incentives were withdrawn, and there was some Rainforest Woods Act that was enacted. It was horrible. Mm-hmm. This thing. First of all, I got to just tell you this, because if you don't know about the Ark Encounter, which is this product of AIG, if you don't know about this, you've got to go online and see this thing. It is absolutely, it's 300 cubits by 50 cubits by 30 cubits, just like it's supposed to be. And it is a massive ark standing in the middle of Williamstown, Kentucky. It is just there. Most of it's already up. You can certainly see it. The video footage of them erecting this thing is unbelievable. It is the Disney of Bible-themed parks. It's amazing. And then up against the side of the ark, they've built a large museum building which kind of presses right up against it, and so that you kind of pass through from one to the other. Now, it's not open yet, but we're all anticipating. And I think you can buy a lifetime family pass for right around $2,000. And if you buy a pass now, you can be one of the first to board the ark, which is good, because there is a forecast for rain for Williamstown, Kentucky, coming up. They've been working on this for years. very nearly finished. And I'm telling you, I am serious when I tell you, when it is open, I am going. I mean, this thing is absolutely, it is to every detail. The wood is hand hewn, it's cut, it's put together just the way the Ark might have been. Mm-hmm. And beyond that, it's a wonderful place to go if you want answers to those pressing questions like, were there dinosaurs on the Ark? Mm-hmm. How many different pairs of animals actually were on the Ark? They've got a very specific teaching about how this all works out. Mm-hmm. And frankly,
the first question I want to ask is,
are there dinosaurs on the Ark? Well, of course there were.
I want to ask is the same one that a now tarnished comedian asked, what's a cubit?
18 inches.
Yeah, he is a little tarnished, isn't he? Yeah. Yeah, it's the length of the handcuffs from the right hand to the second left hand. I think that the amazing thing about this to me is not, yes, I know the state kind of tried to push back on them and keep them out of a program that would have allowed them the same tax incentives that a non-religious entity would have been given.
Well, part of the case also was that they were asking questions of this group that they were not asking of the others, and requirements about not having.
Well, the big thing is they wanted to require them to hire people to work this theme park, if you will, and they had to hire anybody who came in. That was the state hiring practice. You had to hire anybody. Didn't matter what their religious beliefs were. And the argument that AIG was making is, look, we can't have atheists working on the floor. This is a religious exhibit, and and the court found in favor of that. They said, yeah, really, it wouldn't make a lot of sense to have people who don't believe in God being the ones that are sharing the story of God with the people at this exhibit. So we're going to take a bus ride. We're going to go. We're going to see this thing. It's really great.
Okay. All right. We'll let you know when tickets are available.
Yes.
Right.
Hearing this, it does remind me of back when we had here in the county, we had a religious performing arts program going on.
You were very much a part of that.
And I was indeed, and from the building the sets to acting in it, and and I remember we had to go through jump through a bunch of hoops to make sure that we were treated. We were a religious nonprofit organization, and it was difficult for government people to wrap their brains around that's a different kind of animal than a for-profit business, and so therefore they all the tax waiving and all of that kind of stuff that goes along with that.
Because to the drive-by, you looked like a theater.
We look like a theater,
right?
Yeah, right, exactly. Right. And there's we charge a fee to go and see it and that kind of thing. So. Yeah, so it's not unusual for there to be these kind of conflicts, frankly, and I know up in Pennsylvania, they have the big theater up there where they do all kinds of religious festivals and not just festivals but programming, theater, and it's quite popular and has brought in a huge amount of commerce. I mean, we ran the numbers one time. In the 15 years that the play was going on, Worthy is the Lamb, over 500, about 500,000 people came to the play, and the benefit to the county outside of just that body of people coming was in the millions and millions that benefited from
Most went to the oyster bar down the road.
Yeah, to certain businesses within the county. But I want to get on that bus, buddy. I want to go with you and see this.
But what can we build here? I mean, I think the thing I love that they're doing this, but it's Williamstown, Kentucky.
Yeah,
I lived in Kentucky for years. Williamstown is out there. We need something right here. I mean, we have the water. Why didn't we do the Ark first? I don't understand.
Well, it wasn't built on water.
No, but it
was built in Kentucky.
We could have had the real experience.
Well, like you said, maybe a forecast for rain. I mean, maybe that's the time when we'll be heading to.
Well, maybe what we ought to do. I talked to a friend recently, and he back in my Mercy Ships days, and he was looking for someone to help him get a Dutch ministry has built a floating replica ark.
This one sails.
This one sails. It moves. And he's a missionary in Brazil, and they're trying to get the ark down into one of the ports there, Recife, I think. And they're going to sail this ark into Brazil. And he was saying, hey, how would you like to set up the port advance work for bringing the ship into so we could bring this floating ark into Beaufort, put it up on the waterfront.
I love this idea so much. Actually, we were talking about this last week. This is when the radio show stops becoming a radio show and starts becoming a conversation. Yeah. We actually were talking about this last week. The old river boats, the river boats that used to come up and down the coast,
exactly,
and do the minstrel shows and do the preaching thing.
Yeah.
And how hard would it be for us to put a boat out there and do a little dockside preaching? I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Well, folks, we'd like to invite you to write in and join in. Get in on the ground floor.
Send those
of this
checks
new
to
ministry.
our new 501c3.
Yes. All right, now I'm going here.
You're gone now, Ben.
Because I wanted to come back to the First Amendment issue, but it seems like we have.
I don't know if we can get there.
We've gone beyond that. Well, many will see this and they're laughing along with us, and they say this is silly, and this is an amusement park. But the issue at hand really was a true First Amendment issue about where we have our religious expression and how do we interact with government, and which is so much of what this show is all about.
Absolutely, and we talk about it often, don't we? About how government is starting to infringe. They're crossing that bright line between the church-state issues, and it's a real. And thank the Lord that there was a judge that recognized could use good sense to work through this thing.
You don't have to like it. As speech, it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be about whether or not you're kind or your trigger words and all this other things that we're hearing. I mean, that's the answer to bad speech is more speech.
But how sad that the exception to the rule these days is when a judge rules in favor of the First Amendment.
Yeah, I know.
That's just come quickly, Lord Jesus. I'll tell you.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. So again, this is we're not speaking about the efficacy of this park, whether or not it will stand on its own and it'll make money, or if one day it will just be a very giant obstacle to a future freeway at some point in time. It'll be a mall. Yeah.
Or a really nice fire.
Yeah.
But it does bring about where are we with our First Amendment and in protecting that? Where are we with being able to, in the public square, this is obviously very public and quite largely in the public, be able to express our missions or what we want to do?
Yeah, we have to be careful to make sure we have freedom of religious activity, not just worship.
That expression of our faith.
That's right.
Thank you for joining us once again on Faith Matters. Robert Cornegie and Bishop Doc Loomis. I'm Ben Ball, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for joining us for Faith Matters. Email your comments, questions, and suggestions to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life. Give me faith.
Faith Matters is a production of The Talk Station.